Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now, I've been running the Mini Countryman JCW as my long-termer for the last 2 months. I'm 2 months into 6 months already. But it's a massive thanks to Mini UK that I'm getting to experience this car. And I thought it about time that I gave you a bit of an update to tell you how I'm getting on. I'm not actually quite sure where 2 months has gone, but I took delivery of this car on my birthday, 4th of June, and we're now very nearly the 4th of August. Scary, really, really scary. But I have been very, very busy. If you tune into the channel regularly, over my left shoulder, you might see that the garage is making amazing progress. That has been a huge part of my concentration efforts over the last few weeks. But I thought I'd give you an update how I'm getting on with the Countryman. I even gave it a wash. Well, I didn't actually. I took it to the local guys who did a beautiful hand wash because it was looking a little bit sorry for itself. So where do I start? Well, I guess first things first, when I drove this car at the press drives earlier in the year, I didn't have a huge amount of time with the car, but I fell for it very quickly. I love the way it drove, but the way it looks, well, that's certainly, if you like, divided opinion on the channel. Some of you think it's a really nice, edgy, cool design. Others aren't a fan at all. For me, I'll tell you now, it's not a small car. And as you live with it, you realise how big a footprint a car it is, whether that's parking it at the supermarket, manoeuvring it through town or in a multi-storey. It's a big old car, this. And when you park it next to other big cars, you kind of realise. Styling wise though, I'm a big fan, and I know many of you aren't. I think it's got kind of Range Rover-esque looks at the back, and then the front is just, I don't know, it's just a bit different from the outgoing car. I like the little bonnet bulge, I like the work on the front grille, this kind of sensor unit here with the checkered design. I quite like these two little dimples on the front, and I actually quite like the square design of the lights. And I know many of you said that that's departing from Mini and Mini having round lights and so on, but it's a Mini by name, it's a Mini by driving feel, but in all other accounts, all the other things that you would rate a car for, it's not really very Mini. It's a bit of a maxi, really. Having said that, it's really good at what it does. Carrying on the theme of styling, I'll put a little bit of Petrol Ped branding on there. If you want some stickers for your car, head over to Legacy Legends. I'll put a link below. I've got stickers, t-shirts, mugs, there's some really cool stuff. Check it out. Anyway, I have had a few comments about this little red motif here with John Cooper Works. Interestingly, my neighbours have the Countryman E, which is the base one, and this blends in a little bit more because it's more body coloured. I think it's just because of the spec of this car with the Thunder Grey and the red, and then that being red, it just makes that stand out some more. But with the privacy glass, I do really quite like the way that that looks. And then coming around the rear of the car, I just love the lights. I think it looks really, really smart. But this is a kind of living with video after all, and the most important people to ask, Darcy's chilling out in there already, are these two, because one of the things about having a car like this is it's all about, for me, these two. And compared to the Clubman, the boot space is bigger. Now we have removed the parcel shelf, that's inside. We don't use that, do we? Otherwise it bonks you on the head. And it's a very, very good sized boot. You can drop the floor if you want a bit more space. And when you drop the seats, this thing swallows stuff. I actually came back from a friend's house a few weeks ago. We had the girls in the back, we had some luggage, and I also got a rally chopper in there. Why have I got a rally chopper? It's a pink rally chopper as well, actually. Might be something to do with my garage, but stay tuned to my socials. You might find out what I'm going to be doing with the pink rally chopper. But yeah, it's a really, really useful size, and we can go, you can take this. Where do we go with this? We go to the beach. But it's a bit too hot for them today. And I am a bit stressed because I've just got this car lovely and clean, and there's a dirty big black cloud over there that's rumbling, and I think we might be getting some thunder a bit later on. But yeah, no, it's a good space for you too, isn't it? So I think that number one, well, there you go. is the number one bit of feedback is this is a super dog-friendly, family-friendly car. And that's where the bigger size comes into play, right? You can't get, to get the internal space this car gives, it's got to be big on the outside, so I will forgive it that. But I think it looks mega. Now then, in terms of usability, living with it on a daily basis, the interior is just lovely. I had some comments in my initial review about the material used on the dash. I think they call this knit material, and also on the door cards. And I kind of get it. It's been quite dusty recently. It's harvest season on the farm. There's lots of dust around. That screen, now the sun's shining on it, is disgraceful. Apologies for that. So I think just a little vacuum would smarten that up. Absolutely no problems at all. But inside, there's all the things that you want. It's a really, really nice place. I can fit a nice big drinks bottle there, although I would say it doesn't have any grippers. So unless the bottle is a perfect size and slightly softer plastic to kind of wedge in there, it kind of moves around if it's a big bottle. So they're not the best design, although there are some big door bins you can put your bottle in as well. You've got this little cubby hole there. I'll be quite honest with you, I haven't actually put anything in that yet. It looks cool, but it's a bit useless really. And then you've got a nice tray just there. Wireless charge mat's very good. I'm not the biggest fan of the gear changes being there, and I'm also not a biggest fan of the start-stop. I would have quite liked a more special button, or just use a key or something. I think that just doesn't have a great feel to it really, which is a shame. So I think the next thing we need to do is head out and do some driving. Now, earlier on in the week, I had to drive up to Podium Place to meet up with Joe and Pat to record a couple of episodes of the Drive Talk podcast. And I took the Countryman and used it as an opportunity to kind of talk through my thinkings and my findings about this car since I've had it. We've done, I don't know, nearly 2,000 miles in it, I guess, over the last couple of months. So let's go back earlier on in the week and head up to Podium Place. Now, I must say, it makes a pleasant surprise actually getting to drive this car, because Tracy's been driving it a lot. I'm not so sure she's as much in love with it as she was our Mini Clubman JCW, but she does like it, and it's just a brilliant car to do long journeys and to drive on a daily basis. It's comfortable, it's got all the equipment you'd want, and it's also really, really quick. So when I did and it's got that little burbles on overrun, when I did the press drives of this car earlier this year, I commented at the time just how quick a car it was. It's got a real turn of pace, 300 horsepower, although it's quite a big car. That doesn't seem to translate into its driving dynamics at all. It's a very, very clever trick that Mini have pulled off, that's for sure. But the longer you spend in a car, the more time you get to really understand its pros and its cons. There are things about this car that I think could be better. There are things about this car that I've now discovered are even better than when I first drove it. There are little things. These seats look fantastic, but this headrest part here tips just too far forward, so every now and again you just feel your head touching against it, and it's just really, really annoying. You end up sitting almost with your head on a kind of forward tilt just so it doesn't do that. The steering wheel is way too thick. These top bits here at kind of 10 to and 10 past are just ridiculous really. I don't understand that. You can't even get your hands around it. It's not a natural driving position for me. I tend to drive at 1/4 to and 1/4 anyway, and that's just a little bit below that. So it's not an uncomfortable driving position with your hands on the steering wheel, but I just think the steering wheel's too thick. It looks great, and I love this third spoke made of the canvas strapping. And then gearbox wise, at the moment I'm in go-kart feel. and in the standard gearbox you can put it into sport mode by just pushing the little drive selector down. You just hear it kick up a little bit then. What that then does is it just holds the car in gear a little bit longer, and it's just a more sporty and aggressive drive. I would only put it in that if you really are pushing on. Under normal driving, it's just a little bit too much, so just push it again and leave it in drive. But sometimes in the go-kart mode and in other drive modes as well, the gearbox gets a bit confused as to what gear it's meant to be in. You end up doing lots of kick downs and lots of unplanned gear changes. It doesn't seem to be as smooth as it could be. And then in terms of paddle shifting, there's not a mode to go directly into manual paddle shifting. You just pull a paddle. But my biggest issue with when you're in the manual paddle shift enforcement zone ahead is that the gear changes are pretty slick. But unlike the Clubman JCW I had, that had in the main head-up display, in the center of the rev counter, it had a big number which was the number of gear you were in. At the moment I'm in 4th. In this car, that's just that tiny display just there, and I just don't think it's in the right place, and I don't think it's big enough. The gear changes are quick enough, but when you're pushing on, I don't want to have to look at that screen. I really don't. I certainly don't want to have a look at that screen to see what gear I'm in, and I think I understand that in some of the other experiences, the other drive modes, but when you're in the sporty mode, go-kart feel, I would expect that to be as fast driving, track oriented as possible, and in that case I'd expect to have an indicator of what gear I'm in front of me. And I know some people say, oh, surely you know what gear you're in. Well, in a manual car I think you do, because you just have that feel. Even out of your peripheral vision you can see where the gear stick is, and you can, as soon as I put my hand on a manual gear stick, I know what gear it's in. In an auto, that's not the case. Unless you count, you can't really work out where you are. And then the other thing is, I haven't, I pulled a paddle to go into manual, and now because I haven't pulled a paddle manually for a certain period of time, it's just dropped back into the normal drive mode. And I'm not a fan of that. If I go into manual gear change, I want to stay in manual gear change until such time as I don't, and then I want to push a button or a lever to come back into the normal drive mode. Small things, but they're the things that you spot over time. What I love most about the engine and exhaust combo in this, especially in today's diluted world for petrol heads, is it's just got a really great bassy tone and some really nice, what is he doing bringing a truck of that size down this little back road? You're greeted on change ups and change downs with these auditory bits of pleasure from behind, and I don't know how much of that is manufactured and how much of that is actually coming from the car. But let's face it, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's happening, and it's filling my ear holes with these little bits of feedback about how the car's behaving, and it just increases the driving engagement and the driving pleasure. So it is a really great fun car to throw down a B road. It gives a lot of feedback. The steering has it's an interesting feel. Although the car's four-wheel drive, it's quite front axle biased, and there's quite a bit of torque steer, and the steering wheel it's quite alive in your hands and kind of pulls around a lot. It tracks and tramps quite a bit, which can be a bit disconcerting, especially when you're really pushing on and you're really going for it. You do have to be quite aware and quite alive to the fact that the car will move around, especially under hard throttle. Let me try and demonstrate here. Turn down another gear. So it's just pulling there a little bit, and it doesn't have the best steering feel in the world, but it just moves around quite a bit, and in a way I quite like that, because it makes it a mini feeling car, because front wheel drive minis do that all the time. My Roadster does it all the time, and I remember my Clubman did it all the time. It just makes sure you not that you should do anyway, but you would never drive this car one-handed under high acceleration. You need both hands on the steering wheel. You need to be concentrating, and I quite like that because it delivers a really engaging, fun drive. One of the things that makes this car nice on a longer journey is the assisted driving mode. I'm currently set at 70 miles an hour, dual carriageway, speed limit. I've got adaptive cruise, I've got lane departure assistance. It's just telling me now to put my hand on the steering wheel because it is level 2 autonomous driving. But it really does make it very, very easy to cover lots and lots of miles. In the head-up display, I've got my current speed, the speed limit. I've also got just a picture of the lane in front of me and any vehicles in neighbouring lanes. And that makes it really easy to do a long journey in this car. I know that's not a unique thing to Mini at all, but it's done very well. It's easy to set up, it's easy to manage once the car's in place, and it's all good. And I think the Ford Fiesta behind me needs a key to the boot to try and get in it, because I clearly wasn't going fast enough for the national speed limit. Whatever. Now then, in terms of fuel efficiency, now the challenge with this car is it encourages you to drive it enthusiastically, and that doesn't do great things for fuel economy. So if I just pop into the main display here, that central number there, 27.7 mpg, that is our current mpg over a trip distance. I haven't set the mpg for a particular distance, but that is over the last 2,300 miles since we've had the car. I think on a longer journey that would improve significantly. You know, if I'm looking now at my instantaneous mpg, then even on a pull up a hill, you could be looking at, you know, sort of in the 30s, I think is the natural place. But let's maybe on the way back today, because I'm on my way to Podium Place in Newbury to record a podcast, maybe on my way back I'll reset the trip and see what the mpg is for the journey home. It's not a massive journey, it's only like 50 miles or so, but might be quite interesting to do that. Now I'm on my way home from recording Drive Talk podcast at Podium Place. I wanted to show you the satellite navigation. Now, most of the time I've been driving this car, I've been using Apple CarPlay and Waze, but I often get criticised because I don't use the native sat-nav enough in cars. And what's really cool about this Mini is the augmented reality sat-nav. Now I'm just going to try and wait to see exactly who's pulling out when, and they're going to let me out, maybe not. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. Thank you very much. So when you get to a junction, what happens, I've got the map at the bottom, and you've got the front-facing camera, and that's overlaying your directions onto the road in front of you. I've also got a really clear head-up display. And you've got an arrow on the road, and then this arrow here gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's showing you the next major turning that you're going to be making. So in 200 feet, I'm going to be turning right. And as you come up to that, you've basically got some chevrons here pointing to the right and just overlaying onto the road. Now, I think some people might find that overly distracting. You've also got it on the head-up display. It's a little bit more subtle on there. You've just got a little map of the road with an arrow as to where you are on the car. Again, you can see now on this one, I'm going to be turning left up front. I've got a small arrow. I've got some chevrons pointing to the left to get bigger and more distinct as I get closer to the junction. And then when I get to the junction, I'm being shown exactly which way to go, and I just think that's very, very cool. I've also got some, up at the top here, I've got the speed of the road. I've got the fact that the traffic light's currently on red, which is quite impressive. If that changes to green when the traffic lights change, I am going to be hugely impressed. I'm guessing that's got a camera out the front of the car that's scanning the road and looking, or being able to not just recognize speed sign recognition, which is quite common in modern day infotainment systems and satellite navigation systems, but it's also able to recognize the red light on traffic light. Let's see how that gets on. Yeah, so when the traffic light's now disappeared rather than just appearing with a red light shining on it. So there we go. I'm now coming up to, so it's now zoomed into that. So I'm on a bigger road. I've not got the front-facing camera. I've got some traffic information on there as well. There's a very, very competent navigation system on this car, should you choose to use the native satellite navigation rather than using something like Google Maps or Waze. Very cool. Oh, there we go. Front-facing camera's flicked on again.
Police reported ahead.
Very good.
Time to take things slow.
Now, interestingly, that update's coming from Waze, which is running in the background on my iPhone. So I've still got police notifications, and Waze also gives speed camera notifications and so on, as well as things like pothole warnings. So I've got both of those things running at the same time. Now, one thing you do have to do every time you get in this car is turn off the speed warning, and you just hold down the set button on the steering wheel and you get speed limit warning deactivated. Now, you might argue that as long as you don't break the speed limit, that isn't an issue, but you don't have to go too much above the speed limit, which, let's face it, you do sometimes quite accidentally, and that comes on. So I tend to turn that off straight away. The other avoidance systems aren't that intrusive. It's got lane departure warning, but generally speaking, it's not actually too bad. It's funny, I don't use the native sat nav very much at all, but when I do, I often think, oh, it's actually really good. I don't know why I bother using Waze. And what I've done at the moment, there we go, so there's the front-facing camera, is I've got the sat nav being done by the car's native system, but I've got my phone connected using Apple CarPlay, and I'm actually listening to a podcast through my phone, which is one of my favorite things to do in a car. And that's quite possible to get the two things from two separate sources. Sat nav from the car, audio source from your phone. Happy days. And then the phone just sits on this little tray, and actually, although it's a wireless charge mat, it doesn't get too overheated because it's nice and open, and I haven't as yet had a thermal shutdown on my phone while it's been sat on that mat. So we join the dual carriageway. See, plenty of performance. I may have mentioned already that pretty much every time I get in this car, I just stick it in go-kart feel, because that's the kind of car I want to be driving. I've just put it into the most efficient mode, and I just want to see, I've reset the trip when I left Podium Place, and I just want to see what kind of fuel efficiency I can get. But as expected, as soon as you stick this car in the efficient mode, it deadens things off a lot. The throttle has half the response you had before. You have to really make a concerted push on the throttle to get any acceleration. It's deadened the whole car off, softened it off completely. It doesn't feel nearly as sporty and as nimble and as agile as it did before. But the upside of that is I should burn less dinosaur juice. But let's see how we get on. So I'm not too far from home now, and I thought I'd report back. So my MPG for this journey home, 50 odd miles I guess, is just over 37 MPG. So I was in the kind of mid to high 20s driving around in a spirited fashion in go-kart feel. But if you stick it in the efficiency mode, it deadens everything off, and I'm sure if I just sat on a dual carriageway cruising at 65-70 miles an hour, I reckon that number would be maybe higher than that, maybe even dip into the 40s. I think my instantaneous MPG at the moment driving along here now at the national speed limit nearly is 44 miles to the gallon. So if you want this car to be frugal, it will be. If you drive it like a hooligan, like Tracy does and like I do, then it's not going to be quite so frugal, maybe sort of mid to high 20s. But there you go, there is my update so far on the Countryman JCW, a car that I just have so much love for. Hopefully you found that honest, as well as you know, I love the car, but I've tried to be as honest as possible as well. But keep an eye on my socials. I've still got this car for plenty more time, but I shall see you on the next video. If you enjoyed that one, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come, and I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.